Well, hi, Claire.
Hi, Scotty.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Welcome to the first day of our podcast.
I'm excited. Thank you for welcoming me. I guess welcome to you too. You're also here. So we'll welcome each other to this thing because we're the only ones here.
Welcome me to my apartment.
Thank you. Thank you. It's wonderful, as always.
Wonderful. Welcome to our podcast. This is Having a Time with Claire and Scotty.
Yeah, this is something we've talked about doing for a really long time.
Yeah.
And
literally since our restaurant days, 2015, 2016.
Yeah, at least 5 years.
The minute I got
4 or 5.
You were like, oh, let's do a podcast.
Right. Second you got into filming and doing stuff like that, we're like, we should do it.
Totally.
And then, we never did, but it's 2020, so
We're all stuck at home.
what else are we going to do?
Literally, what are we going to do? Collect our unemployment checks and start a podcast.
Right. So let's Google microphones and let's do it.
Let's do it. So
Here we are.
This is episode 1. This is our pilot. It's going to be a little wonky, but we're going to get through it. And it's going to be great. And we're just only way up from here.
We're going to look different in the next episode.
Totally.
I'm going to be blonde.
Blonde AF.
The network's going to recast me.
I'm going to lose 30 pounds and have a nose job.
We're in a different apartment.
Frosted tips. No, this decor is not here. This is just pilot.
You're not gay anymore.
Not gay anymore.
You're very straight.
I'm Christian.
Right.
In line with the 2020 times. So we can segue right into Christianity and Amy Coney Barrett.
Amy Coney Barrett, Notre Dame professor. So she is a Catholic super woman. You know what I mean? She's got 7 kids. She teaches at Notre Dame. She's got this very conservative kind of vibe going for her.
Democrats and everybody hates Catholics.
I feel like Catholics are never a part of either group. They're not. They're
Right.
kind of.
I can say this as a recovering Catholic. That's true.
Right. JFK was Catholic, and that was a huge deal, which shows, how little and how far our country has come in 50, 60 years. That's terrifying.
I know. But also Pelosi and Schumer are Catholics.
I feel like people for a while there kind of rebuked Catholicism so much because progression and politics and stuff like that, and Catholicism was just so behind on the times. But then we have this Pope who's accept, gay people and all of these things. And so Catholicism has kind of in the last 10 years also had this revamp of it's
Right.
acceptable and more normalized than it was.
Right. What was the most oppressive out of all of the Christianity groups?
Yeah, it's
Lot of
definitely
rules.
low-key orthodox.
No.
If you were actually to follow it. My parents didn't eat meat at all on Fridays. Not just in Lent, but full stop,
I
year
remember
round.
those days.
They always ate fish on a Friday. And having worked in every Irish bar in the world, that's a big thing. Oh, we're out of fish on a Friday.
Right.
Oh God. Just a bizarre, a very specific thing that some people who even though they're drinking beer every day, still follow this very antiquated,
Right.
old school tradition.
That's why I find it so weird that that's been kind of the thing, the defense of her. It's oh, they're going after Catholicism. It's not really.
I mean, yeah, it's more just you being extreme in general, which
In her
Catholicism,
views.
I'm saying, has moved away from it. They're
Right.
not, the Pope is don't be like that.
He's
And he's
gay
the
people.
Pope. He's kind of that's, follow his lead.
Right. He's gays.
Yeah.
Instead of no, it's meh.
Yeah.
They're
So
here.
that's concerning,
Right.
of course. Also, 88 of her colleagues today have, in the middle of her hearings, have rebuked her. They've said that she should, withdraw her nomination, which
Right.
I'm sure that all 88 of them are not Catholics. I'm sure Notre Dame has professors that are different religions and maybe even
Right.
atheists or agnostic. But
Right.
that's very interesting that she comes from this conservative private school and her fellow professors and other people in administration are maybe you're not the right fit.
Right.
Maybe the Supreme Court isn't free. Maybe you just come back and teach politics and law here.
Right.
You're doing a great job.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So what's the deal with her now? So we're in the middle of her confirmation hearing, which they have been plowing through speedily, and it's going as you would have expected.
Yeah, I mean, now at this point, these hearings kind of turn into, I plead the fifth. It's really inappropriate for me to discuss any political issue that you would want me to discuss because our ruling of that is still up in the air, whether it's Roe v. Wade, where the ruling's from like 1,000 years ago, or it's talking about the right to bear arms, which seems like an even older issue.
Right.
Like, oh, I can't speak on that because we really haven't finalized where we're at with that yet. So
Right.
she hasn't really said anything. It's kind of the rest of their history as a human being that speaks to whether or not they'll be elected. A lot of great infographics. A lot of great effort to sort of point out the hypocrisy of somebody being, in the middle of an election, and right in the middle of the last month of an election.
Right.
This happening is kind of unprecedented and, an unspoken rule that this is not supposed to happen.
Right.
And a spoken rule that this is not supposed to happen from a lot of Republicans who are now pushing her in.
The hypocrisy is a lot. The infographics are great.
The infographics are great. They're not well done. One in particular that was very good at drawing up all the quotes from Lindsey Graham and et cetera of you never ever nominate somebody in an election year look like the PowerPoint that your first PowerPoint when you figured out that you could do like a background.
Right.
And then the bubbles are have their own background too.
Right.
It's really not that great.
No.
So they should stick to more simpler concepts, or they should hire graphic designers to help them organize their infographics like the ones you see on Instagram or something like that.
Hey, I'm available. Unemployed and available.
I feel like there's lots of there's lots of Instagram infographic people that are probably like,
oh my God.
You should have chosen a dusty pink as the background.
A dusty pink, the millennial pink.
Right.
That's funny. And it's Mitt Romney had a good one.
Mitt Romney had a good one because it's supposed to be red highlighted, but it's such a dark red on a darker background that it looks like he's crossing out. We're
right.
seeing the teacher's edit of his essay.
Right.
This sentence is a run on. I'm just going to redundant idea. So, and again, older people in politics trying to be hip with the kids.
Right.
But having minimal use of Photoshop.
And minimal care.
Minimal care, yeah.
They're make me something.
Right. This is what I wanted to say. It will make it look good, which is not enough direction, I think, when you're Mitt Romney.
Right. Well, and I can't imagine all the kids that went to liberal arts school for graphic design are dying to work for a GOP.
Right.
Candidates.
No one's I can't wait to go into politics.
Right. They're I can't wait to stump for Elizabeth Warren, if anything.
Right. If they did want to go to politics, it would be making sick Instagram posts for Bernie.
Kamala for the people.
Right, Kamala for the people. It is not most of the stuff that on both sides. It's not just the Republicans. The Democrats have a whole bunch of weird things that they're doing online. One of the biggest ones is called America Needs Pennsylvania, which we sure do. I mean,
I'm from Pennsylvania, but I can't necessarily say we need it.
I mean, I love my friend lives in Philadelphia. I love cheesesteaks.
I do like the fries on salads in Pittsburgh.
I'm sure that Pennsylvania wilderness does a lot for our help in global warming. It's probably one of the few places where we still have trees.
Yeah, true.
But, the whole thing with fracking and Pennsylvania being such a battleground state right now, they're trying to get Bruce Springsteen and Don Winslow, who's a crime and mystery author that your dad would read on the beach on vacation once a year. So he's not super successful author, but he's very well known. Kind of these old school pop culture figures trying to get that middle-aged man that voted for Trump probably in the first election and is now oh, this is a lot.
I didn't get taxes back.
I paid way more than $750 in taxes, and I live in a mining town. What? Trying to get him on board. Bruce Springsteen's calling you up.
Well, and the whole thing with Joe is that he's from Scranton. He's that guy from Scranton. So it's obviously he's playing to that piece of his brand.
Yeah, he's the train thing. They're really phoning home that he was a train man. Right. That's such a I think working class sort of something that upper mobilizes a family too. Oh, we were just farmers until granddad became a train conductor. And it's a very old timey and American thing too. trains.
And the video's like, what, how long?
I don't even know. It's
too long.
There's a lot of very long videos. The Lincoln Project came out with a video playing on Trump being Covida, and it's like 2 minutes long of a woman singing new lyrics to the song from Evita that are related to Trump infecting the White House, which is, in theory, like on paper, sounds great. But then they don't, like you're saying, they don't, the 30-second, 45-second rule. They're like, it's so good.
It's like, this could have gone through a second pass at like the SNL writers' room. Just like, let's cut it down. Like Kate McKinnon would have been like, stop it at the chorus.
Like just because it rhymes, and fits the theme of it, doesn't mean it hits.
Totally.
So maybe, we like cut it down a little bit. Although I will say Saturday Night Live in these past 2 episodes, and it's been funny in some ways. We'll leave maybe Bill Burr out of it for a moment, but as SNL as itself as a writing, what the writing is, they could probably do to edit down a little bit too.
I agree.
Like, okay, we get it. The Fly is, people reincarnated coming to get him. Do we need like another 5 minutes of this sketch?
The funniest thing on SNL recently was when Cecily Strong was what's her face.
No one knows this lady's name, yet no one's going to ever forget her screaming at us. And no one wants to watch the Republican National Convention, but you're like, it's like a train wreck. You have to watch it. What again?
She kind of made it worth it just for that moment.
Yeah. What else are we doing? You turn it on, and it's
all I know is she's Gavin Newsom, the governor of California's ex-wife, and left him for Don Jr. Like that's all I know of her.
Oh my! That adds her camp factor. And she is campy as all hell.
It does add up her camp factor.
She literally is I don't even know where she would be in a John Waters movie, but she does kind of remind me of is it Hairspray? I think it's Hairspray.
It could be.
Yeah, Hairspray. The mom of the blonde girl and the rich.
Right.
And she's always freaking out at her. There's one scene where she gets a pimple and she's like, I have to pop it. She screams at her. That's probably not what she says, but you know what I mean? She's just so intense and over the top that it literally reminds me of something from that.
Totally.
Which is scary.
It is a little scary.
And she was one of the first people, I think, to get up and speak. So they were like,
she's like, we're
a strong note to start off on. What?
We're bringing it home. This is the message.
This is the message. We're screaming at you that everything is great.
Who else would have been better to do that but Cecily? That's the funniest moment because she just comes out of nowhere and in a little square in the corner of the screen.
And they look exactly alike, which is hilarious. True. Hilarious.
But I would say about the Biden video though is that it looked like they Googled a compilation of CNN, people from Pennsylvania on CNN, and there was a compilation already available, and they just stuck Bruce Springsteen music to it.
Right. And it's a acoustic version of him singing, I don't know, it's a Bruce Springsteen song, so it's about America and your hometown. Whatever. But yes, they definitely hit up MSNBC and CNN. And Pennsylvania is so frequently used in this sort of way that's election battleground way that you kind of almost want to tell the Democratic Party to don't make it so focused on it being Pennsylvania. I don't know. I feel like if I were these people in this town where fracking was such a big issue,
right,
and you're just used as a pawn, and I signed up to be on CNN once in 2016, and now Bruce Springsteen's humming softly underneath my video.
Truly.
Trying to get people to vote. I don't know.
So funny.
I met a man last night who told me that he skipped the last presidential election because he was having a bad day at work. He told me he was an engineer. Something really bad happened on a job site, and a guy ended up in the hospital, and he was in a coma. So he was having this terrible day, and he's I'm not going to vote. And now that guy will probably not get health care. Because this guy didn't vote. But it was interesting to speak to this man because he was kind of in his emotions about it. He was I didn't vote last election. And look at what I did.
It's kind of hard to like, I know I'm in a space, it's kind of hard to have empathy for some people like that. It's like, how did you not know? Because it's hard. But then again, I need to realize that we're not all on the same, like, wavelength. But still, it's like, how could you not know? Like,
Right.
I still don't even know. Like, people, you drive around into, like, the rural parts of Massachusetts, which is where we are, and you'll see, like, a Trump 2020 sign. And I'm like, it's real ballsy in 2020 to still be publicly supporting this man after everything that's happened. I don't understand it.
I feel like people really just don't want to admit that they were wrong.
Yeah.
And like, also, I think there is a big part of Trump that people are like, oh, he does whatever he wants.
Right. And they're like, now I can do whatever I want.
We all wish that we were kind of like that.
A little bit.
And like, that's the hardest part I think about Trump is like, people are like, why? It's like, because no one wants to admit that you deep down in your heart would also like to just say whatever the hell you want.
Right.
It probably wouldn't be those things, but.
Right.
And another big part of like, coronavirus and how it's hit everybody is in sports. And so in sports, like the Patriots and the Tennessee Titans have had the most people in the NFL as a team be sick. They're kind of getting like damned, how dare you guys, not be able to figure out someone wasn't wearing a mask or went to a strip club or did some shit that an athlete would do. That has an amount of income that never ends. But then the president is allowed to like hold these functions at the White House
like
and
10
all these
days
things.
after he was like deemed infected.
So it's interesting to hear some of them talk about the seriousness of it all. And then, of course, they're held up as role models and put up on a pedestal, especially here in New England, where football and the Patriots and sports in general are life.
Right.
And like, oh, how could Cam Newton know that he was exposed to somebody with coronavirus and then go out to eat? And it's like, well, I mean, yes, he should not have done that.
Right.
And that's probably what led to it spreading throughout the team a little bit more, perhaps. But at the same time, the president is like skippity-doo-dying, inviting people over to the White House for unprecedented campaigning, which is not supposed to be doing at all.
Well, speaking of skippity-doo-dah, did you see that video of him at his rally dancing?
Oh, yes.
That forever burned into my brain. I can never unsee it.
That's the other thing. The weirdest thing about that video is that those people, as a sect of humans, you would never think that they would want to see anyone dancing like that.
No.
Like if you were shimmying and shaking down like Main Street in Ohio doing that, they'd be like, what the hell?
Exactly.
Like, oh, those weird Yankees would dance. And like, it'd like be like the town like Footloose. They're like, we don't dance here.
Oh my God.
But it's literally everything that he does that he's like lauded.
Right.
But that's, I think, one of the downfalls of like nationalism in its extremes is that he's our president, so like whatever he does is great.
I saw Fareed Zakaria talk about this. It's the American exceptionalism that we are somehow different from everybody else in the world. Like, that's why a lot of these people don't wear masks. They think that they're kind of like a whole other human.
Right.
That they don't need it. And like you see that the I forget which host was out in the field talking to the people in the rallies and the lines, and he was like, well, where's your mask? And she goes, well, I don't care if I'm getting it or not. She goes, if I get it and it's my time, that's God's will. And then he goes, well, what if Trump told you to wear a mask? And he put on a mask. She goes, well, then I'd put on my mask. It's like this blind loyalty to this one human being that...
Also, like, the cognitive dissonance of, like, I should be doing it, but I'm not going to do it. Or I don't want to do it, but I'll do it if he tells me. Like...
Right.
What?
Why do you need somebody to tell you to, like, be safe?
We're also very individualistic.
Right.
Like, my cousins in Ireland are like, what? Why? But why? Like, why are people...
You're just like...
Why wouldn't you wear a mask? And not to say that there are angels either, because I also hear stories about how people are like, oh, the pub's closed at 11? Great, let's have a house party.
Right.
Like, well, that's not why they wanted the pubs to close at 11, folks.
Right.
And I'm sure that goes on here as well. But it's interesting to hear them be like, aren't people like, isn't he mean? Like, like... He's saying all these terrible things about people, like he's, he made fun of somebody with special needs once. Like that stuff like doesn't compute in their brain. They're like, how could any American be okay with that?
Right. And like a lot of us are like, We don't know what to tell you.
I mean, it's gotten so extreme that they're trying to kidnap the governor of the state and hold her for treason.
That was
whatever
wild.
monkey, wild kangaroo court that they got going on.
That was a wild story that had like a shelf life of 5 hours and then moved on to whatever antics happened.
She's like, Michiganders, don't worry.
Right.
Poor lady is, got the thickest Michigan accent that anyone I think has ever had, which is very on brand, I guess, for her, but it makes her kind of insufferable to listen to. And I think that things like that really do affect how the news cycle deals with things. Like they had the wife, and this is a sad story. There's a Broadway star. He's one of the first like celebrities to pass away. And now his wife is like in his honor trying to speak of, that COVID is real, especially after what Trump said, that it wasn't that big of a deal. And she's like this gorgeous blonde woman. And they're talking to her like all day long one day. And then the next day, this lady almost gets kidnapped by like a guerrilla warfare group. Right. And they're like, oh, by the way, like this happened. They talked to her a couple times. And then she was just kind of like, yeah, like, thank you to the FBI, which one of them, by the way, worked for the FBI.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I believe so. So, like, that's how they figured it out, which is insane. God. I'm sure maybe he didn't work for the FBI, but some sort of government agency where they had, like, access to him. Right. It was just, like, interesting.
Access. So, it was...
Somebody knew something that they were not supposed to know, like, where her vacation home... And I'm sure her vacation home in Michigan is just, like, down a really long road. Right. Only, like, the locals know that she lives there. Right. It's not, like, the Kennedy compound where there's, like, a wall and a gate... So she was probably pretty much is maybe still gonna get kidnapped, unfortunately, because it doesn't seem like anyone's doing anything about it. They like give her a security guard, and that's have at. I feel like she should have maybe already had one before. Yeah, I don't know. How did it get that far? I don't know.
Hey guys, so we're just taking a small break just to remind you all to follow us on all of our social media. You can find us at Having a Time Podcast over on Instagram and Having a Time Pod over on Twitter. You can find exclusive videos, photos, content, memes, all the things. So check us out over there. And now back to the episode.
The big thing now is that people, obviously, celebrities, everyone else in between are pushing people to vote, but they're not being specific about who to vote. Right. Which is kind of, you can see that from both sides. You could see it from the side of, obviously, we know these people are very liberal. Right. So just say you're voting for Biden and to encourage others to do so. But then, there's that whole, like, you're never supposed to ask people who they vote for, and that very old school idea of kind of more of our parents' generation where you don't talk about, that's between you and that's why you vote in private.
The push is mainly coming from, like, social media from, vocal liberals and activists who are like, this is a very important moment. It's not like normal politics in normal election years at play. There's a lot of things happening. So they're like, is it really that harmful for you to, be specific?
Be honest, too. Right. It's not even being specific. It's just kind of being real. I mean,
I remember back in the early 2000s, Diddy was going around everywhere going vote or die. And he was very vocal about Obama at one point. So I think there's space for them to do so. I don't know why people are hesitant. Do you think maybe it has to do with the two factions of the Democratic Party? How there's a little bit more moderates versus, the more liberals, the AOCs?
Absolutely. I think that some people lean so left that Kamala and Joe don't really represent them. Right. And they're kind of reticent to push, candidate that they really didn't want to be the candidate. Right. So there's like that faction of it too, right? Where you're like, it should have been Bernie. So why would we like push for somebody? I'm just going to push you just to vote. Just vote. Right. Just do it I don't care what you do when you get in there. Right. Vote. There was a big talk about a vote that was for anybody that wasn't the Democrats or the Republicans is voting for Trump as well. Right. Which is, maybe mathematically and statistically true, but it's hard to sort of push people to do something positive when you're kind of pigeonholing their political ideology. You're telling them how they should feel and think. Right. So I kind of do like the just vote.
Right.
Like, just do it.
Right.
But I used to register people to vote at, music festivals where bands like The Dead and Fish and stuff like that were playing. They clearly wanted to speak about leftist politics, even though we were saying we were a nonpartisan group. So that happens on both sides. You kind of like this like weird like tiptoeing. You're on that tightrope where you can't go too far on either side.
I think it's interesting that you brought up how Kamala and Joe represent the more moderate side of the party when like they really tried to drive home the fact during the vice presidential debate that she was this like radical leftist. And it's like,
she used to be a cop.
Literally.
That's how most people on the very far left see it.
Her Twitter fucking nickname is Cop Mala.
Right.
Like, so it's that was kind of hard for me to buy into. I get that they're selling that narrative to a specific subset of people, but I'm like, she's really not that progressive in terms of presentation. She may be progressive in her votes for specific policies, which I guess they did stack that up. She is one of the most progressive in terms of votes. However, it's not really how she communicates herself to people, which I think it's good and bad. There's definitely like a balance there, but we already have Biden as the ticket. It would have been nice to have had like a Warren, somebody who is legitimately speaking these progressive policies.
Right. And she then has to follow suit with him. So we saw that with fracking. That was the biggest thing, was that she was so anti-fracking. And then, she gets asked last week in the election or in the debate. And she's like, oh, well, Joe loves fracking.
Did you see all the memes? Because like RuPaul's a big fracker.
Yeah.
Like fracks in Australia or something like that, where his husband lives or is from or whatnot.
Oh, jeez.
They were like, fracking, Shantae, you stay. I was screaming. It was so funny.
And then on Saturday Night Live, Maya Rudolph, like, who does, she does a lot of different people. She doesn't do impressions. She becomes people, which is why she's so brilliant. Has obviously become Kamala now. And she kind of like immediately switched on a Philadelphia accent and did this big long like diatribe about fracking and how great it was. And then at the end ended it with "Go Eagles." It was just hilarious. And back to that like, but we need Pennsylvania to vote Democratic.
Truly.
Just constant thread through all of this, too. Like, we need the middle of the country, but we don't want to go, like, too into the middle.
Right.
And we definitely won't want to go, like, south, because, like, that's scary. So we'll just, like, stay in Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania's a good, like...
focus all our energy on that.
Right.
So... That's what's happening there, which is sad because it's the voting in the South that's really the biggest issue right now when it comes to lines being really long at early polling, and just people having access to voting has consistently been a problem in the Deep South in communities that are lower income, and then their politics in those places never turn around, and they always end up in that position. And we saw that yesterday, early in this week, of like with Georgia, how long the lines were.
It was happening today as well in Texas. It was the first day for their early voting, and lines and lines. And I guess they just had a judgment from their higher court overnight that said there can only be one ballot box a county in Texas.
That doesn't seem intelligent during a pandemic to have everyone come to one box.
Truly.
Like just even the visualization of an entire county ascending on a box.
When you think of Texas as a state, it's huge. So one county could have like 4 million people and another county have like 60,000.
Right.
So those 4 million people need to go to one place, the same place those 60,000 people go to one place.
We live in like a cutesy little bubble.
We do.
Like I got to go down to like this library that literally looks like it's from out of a movie to go and, be like patted on the back, socially distanced. Thank you so much, Claire, for coming to vote and getting like a big sticker, maybe a pen, probably a cookie.
Right.
We live in New England, so people are just like, you're amazing.
There's
you
a bake
voted.
sale outside.
Like, you work jobs where like you might even have like a restaurant manager be like, hey, if you're a little late on Tuesday to vote. Right. But then in Georgia, There's lines that are 12 hours long. People had to leave to go to work. There are nonprofit organizations like Chef for the Polls, which are chefs who, I'm sure there's a lot of them who have plenty of time these days, as so many restaurants have closed, who provide food for people. Because people are online so long to go vote that it's like human decency to find a way to feed them, because you can't just stand outside for 12 hours and not eat.
So crazy to me to think about that, because how long have you ever waited to vote? I think maybe max for me was 15 minutes ever.
I think the longest I've ever waited to vote was when I lived in Boston. I live outside of Boston now, so it's like that's what I was describing, this like happy-go-lucky suburban kind of vibe. And I also lived in the like college area, like the artsy kind of neighborhood too, in a way. So definitely people that you would hope would be going out to vote. And it was probably, like 15 minutes tops.
It's crazy to me to see those. And a lot of those lines are happening in communities of color. And those are the communities that really need to like the time to vote. You know, I saw this video, this guy, he posted, he said, been here for 11 hours, but we're still here, but we're next in line and we can't wait to vote. And I'm like, that's cool. Your dedication is cool, but you shouldn't be in that position.
You should not be in that position. And like you're saying, they're the kind of people that don't have that time. Like I was saying, we will live in a place where you might have a boss that would allow you to be late or maybe not come to work that day for
like I'm voting today.
A lot of people don't have that luxury. I'm pretty sure my boss now would be like, no, figure it out on your own. So it's kind of interesting to see like how voting access is so systematic as well. It's one of those things that should have always been aware is part of this systematic racism that we have in our country, because it's so blatant in so many different ways. But voting is one where it's like, you can literally see by people's income and their access to like transportation, how much they try to push away those polls from epicenters of like metropolis, so that people just, they don't logically put the polling place in a place where it would be accessible to everybody in that area on purpose.
Because I was watching something that said, voting, it's in the Constitution as a right of ours, but access to it isn't a right. You know what I mean? So they find these loopholes and, technicalities in order to the gerrymandering and all of that. Which
is a thing I really want to bring up, which I wasn't aware of, is that if you thought that you wanted to mail in vote because of, the world being in a pandemic, but now are thinking that's probably like not a good idea and you want to go early vote or just vote on the day of, bring that mail-in ballot with you, because your ballot could become null and void if you don't do that. And be cautious of mail-in voting. If you are going to do it, your signature can be denied because it doesn't match. So if you don't have one of those signatures where every single time it's the same, it might be something that you want to consider. There's a lot of weird idiosyncratic things that happen with that. And also more and more we rely on technology and algorithms to help them figure these things out. So there could be ballots denied for things that aren't.
Now, to clarify, the signature that they would have on file is whatever on your state documents, like your driver's license or something like that.
No, I'm pretty sure for this, they would probably go off of your signature from the primary.
Oh.
Or maybe even your signature from the last election.
Whatever one they have on file.
Yeah, you hear all sorts of things.
I know, they're starting to talk about, like, so many ballots being denied in certain places right now.
Those are some of the kind of, I guess we'll call them loopholes, where they try to say, like, oh, these aren't real ballots. So the safest way is to early vote, which almost a lot of places are doing early voting, and it's pretty more accessible than the idea of maybe waiting for 12 hours on the day of and having to leave.
Speaking of infographics, I'll make a little one of all the states and their dates of who's early voting right now. And I'll put it on our Instagram, which you can follow us at Having a Time Podcast on Instagram and Twitter. I'll put that information there so you can find it.
As we hate on infographics.
You'll
make
I'm going to make mine just as terrible, just so we can be on brand for the 2020 election in the year itself. It's been generally terrible, so
it's the meme going around this week is, what did we do without infographics? Well, but what if we had them in 2003? And it says something like is the Dom holding weapons of mass destruction? It's like, what do we do without infographics? We didn't talk about politics. We didn't have cutesy little pretty fonts to tell us these things. We wouldn't see them.
I wouldn't know what to do without memes in this year. Just to laugh at the dumpster fire of it all.
And it's kind of like human contact because it's about a shared experience.
Right.
It's usually something that enough people would understand, which therefore allows it to be defined as a meme. Right. So you kind of feel like you're in a bar or like a communal area laughing at something together, but you're not.
You're not.
You're not.
You're just on your couch in your PJs that you haven't changed in 3 days.
Right. Waiting for The Bachelor to come on tonight. Which, shout out to LeBron James for winning the NBA Finals and not having to go to further games. Because if that had happened, we would have had to wait another week for The Bachelor to begin.
Is it The Bachelorette?
Or whatever.
Is it what's her face? Claire?
What is even gender these days?
Yeah, what?
I don't know. I honestly don't know if it's The Bachelor or The Bachelorette. I really don't. To me, it's the same thing. I know that it obviously is very different, but to me, it doesn't matter if it's a boy or a girl as The Bachelor or Bachelorette. It's the same.
I think it's The Bachelorette because the
same dumpster fire that I want to watch through. I don't want to watch it, but like I kind of want to watch it.
I don't know. I kind of like The Bachelorette more. There's something about it, like her just like trying to wrangle them.
But The Bachelor, I love the first day on The Bachelor because the girl, there's always like the range of how the women try to get. The guys are kind of all the same. They're like, like I got a car, and like I'm funny.
I'm an engineer. I'm an ex-football player.
Some of them kind of like romantic. The girls do like all of them are doing ridiculous like, shit. Like one comes in on a horse, one comes in on an antique car, the next one's dressed up as a dolphin, the next one is like, what is happening? Like one of them is like shooting a gun.
She was an icon.
She was an icon. I loved that girl.
She just got
so
hammered
much.
Every episode until she was like, I can't anymore.
They all do. Which is another great thing to imagine is that LeBron James is like, I love The Bachelorette. I just love when they all come. And
well, this one will be interesting because I do believe it's The Bachelorette because her season got shut down due to COVID in the beginning because Bachelorette always comes on in the spring. And so they pushed it, and it's usually The Bachelor at this time. But
I don't know what season.
Yeah, so
it's like a sport. Like they usually play it in the spring, but they got to do it in the fall this year because of COVID.
That's true. So they resumed filming at some point during COVID. So it'll be interesting to see like how they spliced the season together.
Do they go get their noses swabbed together?
I don't know.
Like,
There's also
is she like, did you get the test? You can't come over.
There's also a rumor that she like during COVID. She got close with one of the contestants and like was like, I don't want to finish the show anymore because I found my guy.
And we're in a pandemic. So like, let me just go live with this guy and like, an Airbnb somewhere.
They replace her like mid-season. That's the rumor.
Ooh.
So we'll see. I haven't read up on Reality Steve, which I usually do because I don't mind a spoiler, but.
Love that. So Yahoo knows that people love fantasy sports and have nothing at all to do. And now basketball's done, hockey's done. We just have football. Maybe sometimes it gets canceled. So, and baseball, who even knows? I don't even know if the World Series has happened or not yet because nobody cares.
Right.
So Yahoo's doing Fantasy Bachelorette.
Oh, that's awesome.
So you can pick, who you think is going to, I don't know exactly what the schematics of this is, but if you are into The Bachelorette, I'm sure you can join it late since it's going to start. And by the time you hear this, it's going to have already started. But I'm sure they'll let you sneak in week 2 or week 3 or just something to look at just to see how would you even score that. How do guys get more points if they get her to like cry? I don't know. What would be the
who fights with who first?
It could just be like sudden death. Like if the guy you pick gets like voted off first week, like you're out of the pool.
Probably.
But we can make fantasy sports into anything now because people are just that bored.
I mean, we have to do what we have to do to get through it.
You can't go to the casino to gamble, so why don't you just watch The Bachelorette with your girlfriend and gamble on that? I guess is the vibe.
Yeah, that seems like the vibe. I mean, we got to find silver linings where we can.
I thought that was a very 2020 moment that people were like, if you want to bet on The Bachelorette, you can. Yeah. So desperate people are for entertainment.
The desperation is real. All right, Claire, we are nearing the end of our first episode. How do you think it went?
I don't know. I mean, I'd have to listen to it first. I feel like I also say I don't know a lot, which is funny for somebody that really feels like they know a lot of things about things.
You know it all?
No, I don't think I know it all.
You're Bethany Frankel?
No one's Bethany Frankel except for Bethany Frankel.
She knows it all, truly. So we're reaching the segment that we're going to do at the end of every episode where we decide who is having a time this week.
Who is having a time?
Who is having a time? Who is having a time for you, Claire?
So I feel like the person I'm about to say is having a time this week is probably been having a time since, mid-November 2016.
Yeah.
But God bless his soul, he's been having such a time this week. His name is Daniel Dale. He's the CNN fact checker.
Oh.
And he's very intense when he speaks. And he's exhausted. This man is exhausted. He has said the same 3 sentences about 17 different topics for the last 4 years. And now he's getting to the point where he's exasperated. He's like, this one is definitely not true. Or this one is partially true. But I will say that he's having a time because to be a fact checker, you have to be an incredibly bright person because while you look these things up, it's kind of like a Rolodex that you have in your brain.
Right.
You're like, oh, the Affordable Care Act. I kind of remember how every single person voted on that. I kind of remember what any notable person said on that. Right. I might not remember the direct quote, but I remember the vibe.
Right.
And that to me is just amazing in and of itself. But in the last week with the vice presidential debate, and then any time that Trump opens his mouth, those two things combined are just not true. And he said so many things that were wrong about COVID that Daniel Dale is the political fact checker, but he's still no. You don't even need to call out Sanjay. Right. Sanjay can go home early. He's my favorite political person. He's my favorite journalist on TV right now.
Yeah.
Except for Katie Tur. She's also, I love Katie Tur too. That's just a personal
being a fact
thing.
checker in this era of news.
He's going to faint one day because he's just
his job used to be, it's 80% true.
Right. And usually they do some really dry stuff. Actually, that wasn't voted in on that bill. That was a tag-along onto this bill.
Right.
So it was partially true. It's usually not this salacious.
Right.
But he's got a lot of meat to work with because there's a lot of false things happening. And then now they're Don Lemon, whoever it is that goes to him is how you doing, Daniel? He's just I'm ready to freak out. Because, we all know that what he's saying is wrong, but imagine if you could, academically write a research paper about every single thing that Donald Trump said, negating it, because that's how false is what he's saying.
Your MLA format would be most of your report.
Right. And your reference sheet would be 5 references, because,
right.
He's just not saying anything true whatsoever. It'd be very easy to ideologically cut him down. Who do you think is having a time?
Well, mine's a little lighter. And I'm just going to say, collectively, the gays are having a time.
Well, I feel like the gays are consistently just having a time.
We're always having a time, but very specifically, because Mariah Carey posted a photo with just director's chairs with her initials MC, the initials AG, and JH.
Oh, yes.
The Yuletide will certainly be gay this year. Her collaboration with Ariana Grande and Jennifer Hudson. First of all, she has not acknowledged Ariana's existence outside of an Instagram story share of thank you. So the cosign.
I like how you are the Daniel Dale of whether or not Mariah Carey has spoken about something. You are the fact checker of Mariah Carey. So you're on March 25th, she retweeted.
Truly. It was last year. I think it was last year. It was happy anniversary or something. It was a happy birthday that Ariana sent her. And it was just
the queen has acknowledged her presence.
We're all just having a time. We're waiting for this elusive collab.
You're having a Yuletide. You're having Yule time.
A Yule time.
Well, that's great because all I want for Christmas is you is a human. That's something that it's a collective human experience. Truly. We all know that song.
And we know the minute it turns November 1st, we're okay, we're ready for Christmas. We're ready to just like be in the season, watch all the things, do the specials. Like, I consider Christmas and Thanksgiving like together.
Like a moment. Like a pie-centric moment.
Very much so. It's like the holidays. Like, we're in the season.
Get your cute plaid outfits out. It's time to see grandma.
Cute, but make it red because we're festive.
You're probably going to eat a lot of stuffing. There's going to be a lot of different cheese, a lot of different crackers.
A lot of cheese. A lot of dips, a lot of brands.
A lot of dips, a lot of chips. Also, all I want for Christmas is you is like, you know, that was part of her like resurgence.
Right.
If you will. We were all like, oh yes, Mariah Carey is queen. Like a couple years ago, it went back into the top 10. It was this big thing. Now she has her book out. She's like cemented, you know, in this revival of herself. She's now like, she always was, in my opinion, but now she's like an artist.
Once every female artist or musician gets over that hump, we all love them again, and they're just kind of like cemented in culture. I feel bad for Jennifer Hudson in this moment. I mean, allegedly, it's JH. Who else would it be? Whoever the JH is, no one's gonna care because the whole Ariana Grande Mariah Carey moment is like so hyped up.
Right.
Like, there didn't need to be a third there, but you know, Mariah was like, I'm not doing this alone.
Yeah, it's like Superman going to Krypton and like meeting his family, his creators.
Truly.
Like Ariana realizing what planet she came from. Like,
truly.
You belong as one of my children. Because they are very much, I think, in the same realm.
Same realm, especially now, musically a little bit. So yeah, that's my moment. One final plug, if you haven't listened to her audiobook, Mariah's audiobook, I highly recommend it. It's got me through the last 2 weeks, my soundtrack. So,
she's reading, she's singing.
She's reading, she's singing, she's disclosing.
I love that you're having a time as the gays and not Ariana Grande, not Mariah Carey.
No, the gays.
Not Jennifer Hudson.
No, we all collectively gasped on Twitter and Instagram.
This is what we've all needed. It's like Nightmare Before Christmas. Like Christmas was canceled until this photo came out, and they're like, it's back on.
Well, it's like
get out the peppermint mocha. We're doing it.
This year has just been such garbage in so many ways, and it's like, oh, we have these people that we love. They're giving us some goodness,
right?
And we have to grasp on it.
Hopefully, Christmas will give everyone those warm and fuzzies because it's about like being stuck in the house anyway,
right?
I mean, I say stuck, which is kind of rude to like your mom and your grandma. Like, but that's kind of what
some of us aren't even going to be able to see our families because of travel and COVID, and
I don't have to make up an excuse this year.
Truly, that's the vibe.
I'm sorry, I'm like the cold-hearted Grinch. Like, sweet, I get to spend Christmas by myself.
Myself. That's the vibe I'm on.
That's kind of just my vibe. I'm sorry,
but I like the holidays and I like the family vibes.
Right,
we can Zoom. It's fine.
Right.
You know who else is having a time?
Who?
We are.
Oh.
This is our first one.
Full circle.
Full circle. Admittedly, having a time comes from you.
Yes, this is one of my phrases that I make up that then everybody sort of finds themselves saying, and they're like, what? But also, I didn't make up having a time.
Yeah.
It's just my utilization of it.
Right.
That is signature to me.
Right.
Because you can be having a time and it can be positive. You can be having a time, it can be negative.
Or it could just be like existing, like, oh, we're just having a time.
Just having a time. It's really good for descriptions of like when people are emotional about something in any good or bad, like I was saying, emotion. When people are confused, it's a good thing. Like, you know, they're just kind of like having a time with it.
Time.
like us, we're kind of like having a time with this podcast.
Having a time.
Figuring out which way to turn the microphone.
Yeah. Oh, that's the struggle that was.
Do we want it on circle mode or do we want it on tiny mushroom mode?
Tiny mushroom mode. Official descriptor.
Right.
Official descriptor. So far, so good. I think first episode went well.
I think so. I think this is a solid pilot episode.
Yeah.
It's not a pilot episode like Breaking Bad.
Right.
Or Glee.
Right.
Where it's almost like superior to the rest of the series in its own like magical way.
Right.
It's more like the pilot episode of like a really successful sitcom that took a while.
Right, where like everybody's kind of watered down versions of themselves. Actually, I think of Schitt's Creek in that way. Like the pilot episode of that is everyone's kind of like this subdued version of who they eventually become.
Yeah, David and Alexis are almost like different characters.
Right.
She's not as goofy in her mannerisms, and she's very like cooler almost. And then as the series progresses, you kind of see that she's very like animated and stuff like that. She's not like that in the first episode at all.
No, so we're gonna be goofy. Apparently, that's gonna be our progression.
That's gonna be our journey.
Our journey.
I love that journey for us.
Love that.
Love that.
Well, thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, we'll be having a time in the meantime.
Oh,
and then next week we'll have another time.
And another time. And in the meantime, have a time and follow us on our socials.
Yeah, we're growing.
Growing.
This is just the beginning.
Just the beginning.
So, watch this space.
Watch this space, and we will be here.
Yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. See you guys.